The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 14, Part 2. The Bottom of the World. Your Highness, he said, if my old friend Reepicheep the mouse were here, he would say that we could not now refuse this the adventure of Bism without a great impeachment to our honour.
Down there, said Gold, I could show you real gold, real silver, real diamonds.
Bosh, said Jill rudely. As if we didn't know that we're below the deepest mines even here.
Yes, said Gold. I have heard of those little scratches in the crust that you top dwellers call mines. But that's where you get dead gold, dead silver, dead gems. Down in Bism, we have them alive and growing. There I'd pick you a bunch of rubies that you could eat and squeeze you a cup full of diamond juice. You won't care much about fingering the cold, dead treasures of your shallow mines after you've tasted the live ones of Bism.
My father went to the world's end, said Rillian thoughtfully. It would be a marvellous thing if his son went to the bottom of the world. If your Highness wants to see your father while he's still alive, which I think he'd prefer, said Puddleglum, it's about time that we were getting on that road to the diggings. And I won't go down that hole, whatever anyone says, added Jill.
Why, if your honours are really set to go back to the underworld, said Golg, there is one bit of road that's rather lower than this. And perhaps, if that's flood still rising...
Oh, do, come on, said Jill. I fear it must be so, said the prince with a deep sigh. But I have left half my heart in the land of Bism. Please, begged Jill. Where is the road? Asked Puddleglum.
There are lamps all the way, said Golg. Your honour can see the beginning of the road, the far side of the chasm.
How long will the lamps burn for? Asked Puddleglum. At that moment, a hissing, scorching voice, like the voice of fire itself, they wondered afterwards if it could have been a salamander's, came whistling up out of the very depths of Bism.
Quick, quick! To the cliffs, to the cliffs, to the cliffs, it said. The rift closes, it closes! Quick, quick!
And at the same time, with an ear-shattering cracks and creaks, the rocks moved. Already, while they looked, the chasm was narrower. From every side, belated gnomes were rushing into it. They would not wait to climb down the rocks. They flung themselves headlong, and either because so strong a blast of hot air was beating up from the bottom, or for some other reason, they could be seen floating downwards like leaves. Thicker and thicker they floated, till their blackness almost blotted out the fiery river and the groves of live gems.
Goodbye to your honours, I'm off,
shouted Golg, and dived. Only a few were left to follow him. The chasm was now no broader than a stream. Now it was narrow as a slit in a pillar box. Now it was only an intensely bright thread. Then, with a shock, like 1,000 goods trains came crashing into 1,000 pairs of buffers, the lips of rock closed. The hot, maddening smell vanished. The travellers were alone in an underworld which now looked far blacker than before. Pale, grim and dreary, the lamps marked the direction of the road. Now, said Puddleglum, it's 10 to 1 we've already stayed too long, but we may as well make a try. Those lamps will give out in 5 minutes, I shouldn't wonder. They urged the horses into a canter and thundered along the dusky road in a fine style. But almost at once it began going downhill. They would have thought Golg had sent them the wrong way if they had not seen on the other side of the valley the lamps going on and upwards as far as the eye could reach. But at the bottom of the valley the lamps shone on moving water. Haste! cried the prince. They galloped down the slope. It would have been nasty enough at the bottom even 5 minutes later, for the tide was running up the valley like a mill race, and if it had come to swimming, the horses could hardly have won over. But it was still only a foot or two deep, and though it swished terribly round the horses' legs, they reached the far side in safety. Then began a slow, weary march uphill, with nothing to look at but the pale lamps which went up and up as far as the eye could reach. When they looked back, they could see the water spreading. All the hills of Underland were now islands, and it was only on those islands that the lamps remained. Every moment, some distant light vanished. Soon there would be total darkness everywhere except on the road where they were following. And then, even on the lower part that left behind them, though no lamps had gone out, the lamplight shone on water. Although they had good reason for hurrying, the horses could not go on forever without a rest. They halted, and in silence they could hear the lapping of water. "I wonder, is what's-his-name, Father Time, flooded out now?" said Jill, "and all those queer sleeping animals?" "I don't think we're as high as that," said Eustace. "Don't you remember how we had to go downhill to reach the Sunless Sea? I shouldn't think the water has reached Father Time's cave yet." "That's as may be," said Puddleglum. "I'm more interested in the lamps on this road. Look a bit sickly, don't they?" "They always did," said Jill. "Ah," said Puddleglum, "but they're greener now." "You don't mean to say you think they're going out?" cried Eustace. "Well, however they work, you can't expect them to last forever, you know," replied the Marshwiggle. "But don't let your spirits down, Scrub. I've got my eye on the water too, and I don't think it's rising as fast as it did." "Small comfort, friend," said the Prince, "if we cannot find our way out. I cry you all mercy all. I am to blame for my pride and fantasy which delayed us at the mouth of the land of Bism. Now let us ride on." During the hour or so that followed, Jill sometimes thought that Puddleglum was right about the lamps, and sometimes thought that it was only her imagination. Meanwhile, the land was changing. The roof of Underland was now so near that even by the dull light they could now see it quite distinctly, and the great rugged walls of Underland could be seen drawing closer on each side. The road, in fact, was leading them up into a steep tunnel. They began to pass pricks and shovels and barrows and other signs that the diggers had recently been at work. And if only one could be sure of getting out, all this was very cheering. But the thought of going on into the hole that would get narrower and narrower and harder to turn back in was very unpleasant. At last the roof was so low that Puddleglum and the Prince knocked their heads against it. The party dismounted and led the horses. The road was uneven here, and one had to pick one's steps with some care. That was how Jill noticed the growing darkness. There was no doubt about it now. The faces of the others looked strange and ghastly in the green glow. Then, all at once, she couldn't help it, Jill gave a little scream. One light, and then the next one overhead, went out altogether. The one behind did the same. Then they were in absolute darkness.
"Oh,
"Courage, friends," came Prince Rilian's voice. "Whether we live or die, Aslan will be our good lord." "That's right, sir," said Puddleglum's voice. "And you must always remember there's one good thing about being trapped down here together. It'll save funeral expenses." Jill held her tongue. If you don't want other people to know how frightened you are, this is a good and wise thing to do. It's your voice that gives you away. "We might as well go on as stand here," said Eustace, and when she heard the tremble in his voice, Jill knew how wise she had been not to trust her own. Puddleglum and Eustace went first, with their arms stretched out in front of them for fear of blundering into anything. Jill and the Prince followed, leading the horses. "I say," So it came Eustace's voice much later. Are my eyes going queer, or is there a patch of light up there? Before anyone could answer him, Puddleglum called out, Stop. I'm at a dead end, and it's earth, not rock. What are you saying, Scrub? By the lion, said the prince, Eustace is right. There is a sort of... But it's not daylight, said Jill. There's only a cold blue sort of light. Better than nothing, though, said Eustace. Can we get up to it? It's not right overhead, said Puddleglum. It's above us, but it's in this wall I've run into. How would it be, Pole, if you got on my shoulders and saw whatever you could get up to it?